Hamill from Care.com. Welcome to today's Care.com webinar, The Transition, Supporting New Parents in the Workplace. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am thrilled to introduce our three wonderful panelists for today. We have Ann Weisberg, Senior Vice President at Families and Work Institute. We have Mark Schmitz, Senior Vice President of Business Solutions at Knowledge Universe, and Mariella Gockel, America's Flexibility Leader at EY. We hope you find today's session informative and engaging. Today we will discuss what today's modern family looks like, how organizations can become more family-friendly and adjust to shifting parental roles, best practices for retaining new parents, and we'll also take a closer look at EY's story, their programs, supports, and outcomes. During the webinar, please feel free to submit questions using the chat or questions box in your GoToWebinar interface. We will address as many questions as we can at the conclusion of the event. Also, for your reference, you will be receiving a copy of the webinar deck in addition to the recording link within the next day or two. Thanks again for joining us today. And with that, I will hand it over to Ann Weisberg from Families and Work Institute. Ann, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sarah. And if we can go to the next slide. I thought I would introduce myself briefly to all of you. First of all, the Families and Work Institute is a nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank, basically, and our mission is to do research to work, learn, and live by. And you'll hear more about our research as we go along. But in terms of my own career, I've done a number of different things, including in talent roles, both at Deloitte and at BlackRock. My area of subject matter expertise is diversity and inclusion, including work life, and I've written 2 books on those topics. One called Mass Career Customization, Aligning the Workplace with Today's Non-Traditional Workforce, and a book that came out a long time ago but still has relevance today, especially to our topic today, Everything a Working Mother Needs to Know. So with that, we'll get into the sort of meat of what I'm going to cover if we go to the next slide, which is sort of the changing nature of family life in this country and what that means for the workplace. So really have to start out by saying that today there is no typical American family. As you see with the bar chart on the right, in 2012, which is the most recent census data, you can see that there are all kinds of households, all kinds of families in this country. I would say, if anything, it's the diversity of family life that is really the common thread, and diversity on every dimension. So, you know, we have households that are married, cohabiting, single. Today, 4 in 10 Americans are living with at least one step relative. So there's diversity on that front, and you know, there's diversity in terms of age, of multi-generational families living together, and as well as, you know, race and ethnicity, multicultural families. So if we go to the next slide, I think one of the most interesting sort of trends is that multi-generational households are actually on the rise, and that's fueled by a couple of things. 1 in 4 millennials are actually living at home today, so that's one of the reasons why we see a rise in the number of multi-generational households. And it is also true that in many communities of color, multi-generational households are more prevalent than in the white communities. So, for example, in Asian American communities, 27% of households are multi-generational. So if we go to the next slide, I thought I would maybe give you a personal sense of what this means, and tell you a little bit about my own family. My husband and I have been married for almost 7 years. It's a second marriage for both of us, so each of us was a single parent at some point. We have 5 kids between us, It's a multiracial family. My husband's Mexican-American, and I'm white and Jewish by sort of ethnic, I guess, cultural tradition. But on the picture of the young woman with the baby in her arm, that's actually my half-sister who is Dominican. So I have sort of lots of cultures in my own family. And she has her other arm around my cousin who's gay. So, you know, my family obviously is unique, but it's not unusual to have this kind of diversity in families across this country. So if we go to the next slide, one of the things that has been in the news sort of a lot, obviously, for many reasons, is that same-sex couples are on the rise, and they are increasingly accepted. And there are now over 600,000 same-sex couple households in the U.S., 16% of whom are raising a child. So we have to think about, you know, that the sort of uniqueness of those households as well. If we go to the next slide, I think if you're looking at all of these trends from the standpoint of children, and clearly not all U.S. households have kids, but since this webinar is about the transition to parenthood and the effect that has on the workplace, it's important to know, I think, that the vast majority of children in this country are being raised in households in which all the adults are working outside the home. And that trend is driven by both the fact that dual earner couples are on the rise, as well as the fact that there are more and more single parent households. So 1 in 4 households with children is headed by a single parent, who by definition is, you know, is sort of the only person, the only adult responsible for both the care at home and the financial, you know, responsibility for the household. So if we go to the next slide, you know, the flip side of that, in terms of the changes that are most relevant to employers thinking about their employees, is that women are increasingly the breadwinners in their families. So there was a big study that came out last year called Breadwinner Moms by the Pew Research Center, and what it showed is that 40% of households now have a mother as the sole or primary financial provider. That is really a sea change from, you know, 10 years ago. And it's driven, as you can see by this slide, in many ways by the fact that there are so many single parent households where the mother is both the financial provider and the care provider. If we go to the next slide, I think you know, it should be no surprise that as the role of women has changed at home, so has the role of men. And fathers are increasingly providing care. So our research shows that dads have increased the time they spend with their kids during the workday by 65% over the last 30 years, and that more and more fathers, especially young professional fathers, really identify themselves as a father, as providing both care and the financial means for their family. So this is the bar chart on the right is from research that actually EY, a Mary Ellis organization, funded at the Boston College Center for Work and Family, and they've been doing a whole series of research looking at the new dad, and it's clearly the case that, I mean, here you see 75% of young professional fathers see this themselves as providing both care and cash, if you will. If you go to the next slide, there's the problem where this sort of meets the intersection of home and work is that an increasing number of fathers are saying that they have high work-life conflict. So our research, and this is our research which we've been asking the same question over many years to both men and women at work about their work-life experiences, you can see that work-life conflict for men has risen exponentially and is now, there are more men reporting higher levels of work-life conflict than women. So, we say this is not a women's issue. This is really a workforce issue. How to help people manage, the responsibilities at work and at home. If you go to the next slide, when you overlay the issue of caring for children, I'm sorry. So, right, the workplace has not really caught up to the fact that the roles of fathers is changing. I mean, to some extent, I think we're farther ahead in terms of reflecting the changing roles of women than we are the changing roles of men. And this is from our research on specifically the percentage of employers that provide different forms of parental leave. And as you can see, in 2014, there were still 20% of companies that should be complying with the Families and Medical Leave Act that are not providing the required amount of leave for a spouse or partner, which in most cases means the father. If we go to the next slide, when we overlay the issues of child care and caring for children with elder care, the picture really becomes quite significant. So we have been asking people about their elder care responsibilities in our research, again, over many years. And 5 years ago, we asked, do you expect to provide elder care in the next 5 years? And 48% of employees said yes. So 1 in 2, basically, of people in your companies are probably either providing care or elder care or expect to provide elder care. And there are many parents in the workplace who are both providing child care or care for children and are caring for elderly relatives and family members. So if you go to the next slide, what we have found is that sandwich generation, if you will, is the one that reports the most work-life conflict of any of the sort of generations in the workplace. And that, makes sense. So that's sort of the picture of, what these changes in family life mean in terms of people at work and what, you should be thinking of as an employer around all of that. But I do want to end with a final kind of point, which is what we all have in common, if you go to the next slide, which is that in the midst of all of this change, we all, like 98% of Americans, say that family is either the most important or one of the most important elements in their lives. So we should not lose sight of that. We are all connected through the importance and the significance of family in our lives, both as individuals, as employees, and as employers. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Anne. It's so great to see a snapshot of the increasing diversity of today's families, and you make a great point that it's so important for employers to really stay abreast of these changing family dynamics. Thank you so much. Next up, I'm going to hand it over to Mark Schmitz from Knowledge Universe. Mark, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much, Sarah. And good morning or good afternoon, depending on which time zone everyone's in. My name is Mark Schmitz. I'm the Senior Vice President of Business Solutions for Knowledge Universe. And Knowledge Universe is one of the largest early childhood education and care companies in the U.S. as well as abroad. A little bit about my background is most of my professional career I've been in organizational consulting and working with organizations on issues and topics related to organizational effectiveness and such. I owned my own business for 9 years, had a little over 300 employees, and one of the primary drivers for me leaving that organization is I had my first child, and we were thinking about having our second child, and the workload was just too great, and I wanted to spend more time with my children. So I did the opposite of what most folks are doing, and I went back to corporate America to find more time with my children, and went with Right Management, and have been in this role now for about 2 years, and very passionate about early childhood education and family care. So glad to be with everyone today. And I'd like to share a little bit more about how organizations are approaching things, and what are the programs and processes and protocol that organizations are engaging in to really attract, retain, and engage those parents and those families. So next slide, Sarah. So first off, organizations are doing things a little bit different to become more family friendly. The first thing they're doing is really stepping back and assessing what are the overall needs of their workforce population. As Ann referenced, families are very different today. There's so many different needs, different requests. So it's helpful to step back, use either a survey, use focus groups, whatever you can do to really assess what are those life priorities outside of work, and approach it in more of a one-size-fits-one solution versus a one-size-fits-all. And today, organizations are starting to realize that, just meeting the minimum requirements when it comes to leave and it comes to those things aren't really meeting the table stakes. If you want to be competitive in the market and you want to be competitive in attracting and retaining the best talent, it's coming down to really going above and beyond what's required. So let's talk a little bit about some of the trends. A lot of the organizations that I consult with today, and some of the research is showing that organizations are looking at family-friendly benefits, or benefits in general, from more of an investment mindset, I guess I'll say, versus a cost mindset. They use financial models now to see what that return on investment is to providing different family-friendly benefits and investing in those benefits. And they're finding that they're getting quite a good return. They understand that their top talent, their talent within the organization, that's their greatest asset. And to be able to retain that pays great dividends. And one of the ways to retain it is through benefits and leveraging them in the correct way. The other is choice and flexibility. It's a big trend where in the past, even in my organizations and as I owned a business, it was back in the day where I'd say, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is the benefit everyone has. Let's get back to work. And it was more of a one-size-fits-all. Today, it's providing that choice and flexibility, where and when you need the benefit, how you need the benefit, managing the outcomes versus managing the actual benefit itself. So we'll share a little bit more about that as we get to some of the other slides. But the other is equity. And what I mean by equity is some of the trends are, it's not just for organizations aren't making the assumption, okay, there's young children that we need to help care for. They're now starting to look at, what do we need to do for school-age children, high school children, children with special needs, and how does that impact the family, and how does that impact the family's work? Ann referenced a lot about the number of individuals who are currently caring for or will be caring for adults and seniors. So, one of the trends is more and more organizations are making sure that the benefits are equally distributed or equitable, if you will, throughout the organization. Next slide, Sarah. And some of the programs and processes, we talked a little bit about choice and flexibility, but one of the things that's incredibly important when you develop a program or a process to help parents have a smooth transition back to work or back to the workplace is to make it easy. We recently did a survey, an engagement survey, because we wanted to understand the emotional connection parents have with not only a child care center, but with what parents have with the benefit that's being provided to them, specifically around early childhood education and care. And what was the number one driver of engagement was make it easy. Make it easy for me to access it, make it easy for me to engage in it. Don't have me go hunting down how I have to engage. So I think it's very important for organizations to be more proactive than reactive in sharing the programs that are available, and then the processes they have in place that help parents engage very easily. It was actually a surprise when Gallup came back to us and shared some of this information, but overwhelmingly it was just make it easy for me to access it, get involved, identify with it, and engage with it. Was one of the key drivers of engagement. When we talk about best practices to retain new parents, a lot of them are new practices, but one of the best practices is, again, keep the entire family in mind. They may be new parents, maybe bringing home a newborn, maybe parents for the second or third time like myself, and struggling not with care for my youngest, but for my school-age children, and how do I manage the transportation and all the other things that go along with it. The other best practice is really understanding the accessibility and affordability. Again, just worked with a company that owns call centers around the country. Very critical for employees to be in the call center taking calls. It can really disrupt the business in a big way if they're not there. But on the wages that the call center folks were being paid, it made it very difficult for care, whether that care be in the home, in a center, et cetera, for them to not necessarily access it, but to afford it. So you find more and more companies today making that transition and trying to retain those new parents by subsidizing or somehow making them aware of any federal, state, or local subsidies that are available. So again, it's about informing and educating your employees, and especially those new parents. Next slide, Sarah. I won't spend a lot of time here, but one thing that we've found really works well, and it is a best practice and somewhat of a next practice, if you will, to ease parents back into the workplace is to really start before they leave the workplace. You know if they're leaving, you know if they're going to be having a child. So start sharing information that costs you, the employer, nothing, but is very valuable to the parent. For instance, it could be things around simple things such as brain development. Do they understand how a child's brain development happens? Do they understand that 70% of that brain development happens in the first 3 years of life? What can they do pre-birth to actually help start building that foundation? Just basic information as to how do you assimilate your new child into the family if they're siblings. It could be anything from blogs around potty training. It could be a variety of different information. It's available. There's experts that are out there that can provide it. But getting them engaged before they leave and getting them informed. And then the other piece is why they're away, make sure that they understand what their options and choices are, that they have choice and flexibility when it comes to not only care, but when it comes to thinking about their whole family, their school-age children, could be high school children, could be their senior parents. And it could be as simple as giving them a coach or a mentor to talk to who's been through this before and can help them think through these things. So again, the best practice is open communication and continue to engage, continue to educate. Next slide, Sarah. So as we think about this, there's three core ways that organizations are really looking to not only attract or acquire the right talent, but also retain and engage those working parents that are critical to the organization. So what they want to do is they want to look at it from a scope of, hey, how do I accelerate individual and organizational growth? The first is to take the time to assess your population. The recommendation would be to assess the family care needs and benefit needs, if you will, of your organization every 2 to 3 years. And then continue to bridge the gap between your benefit strategy, whether it be for working parents, whether it be for your entire organization, but bridge that gap between your benefits and then the talent strategy. Once you build that bridge, it makes it much, much easier for not only your employee families, but also the organization to really accelerate growth. And the last is continue to add value, continue to educate. And educate and add value throughout the organization. Once you do the assessment and understand what the needs are of your organization, as Ann was sharing earlier, it could be a variety of things from elder care to senior care to adoption to special needs. You know, how can you build a very inclusive benefit package to your workforce? So final note is that just remember, we always have to continue to evolve what we're doing for our working families because our workplace continues to evolve. Much more multi-generational workforce, much more diversity in our workforce, and those life priorities outside of work are different for almost every family, so we just need to be cognizant of that. Thanks so much, Sarah. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Mark. So recruitment, retention, and engagement, as Mark discussed, are definitely key pain points for employers when it comes especially to their new parent demographics. So thank you so much, Mark, for sharing some actionable best practices with us. Lastly, we'll hear from Mariella Gockel from EY, who will tell us about her organization and new parent support programs they have in place. Mariella, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Hi, everyone. As Sarah mentioned, I'm Mariella Gockel, and I lead EY's flexibility strategy in the firm. I'm part of what we call our America's Talent team, and I sit in what we call our Inclusiveness Center of Excellence, and that's part of our diversity and inclusiveness organization. And I'm delighted to be here today. I've actually been with EY. Some of you may know us as Ernst & Young. I've been with EY for 34 years. I started as an accountant, as a CPA, and slowly morphed into a human resources professional. I have two children. James is 26, and my daughter Alex is 23. And when James arrived, I went on a reduced schedule, flexible work arrangement. And that really helped me think through what I wanted to do with my career as an HR professional, and it's led me to this path of how do we contribute to helping all of our people succeed both personally and professionally. So with that, let me tell you a little bit about EY. Sarah, you could flip the slide. EY is, as many of you know, a large global organization. We have over 190,000 people in 150 countries and about 700 offices throughout the world. And we're a professional services firm, and you can see that we provide services around assurance advisory, tax TAS, and what we call core business services, which is the service line that I sit in. Sarah, again, slide, please. So we have a program called EY Assist. Many of you have something very similar where you house your employee assistance program and your resource and referral program in one program. Ours happens to be called, as I said, EY Assist. And one of the things that we offer and that I'm going to talk a little bit about today is really our focus on family and what we call Family Matters. But we also offer services in things like academics and daily life and health and well-being, et cetera. But what I really want to focus on today is family and how we help our families really grow, develop, and our men and women that work at EY, how they can succeed both personally and professionally. So if we look at the next slide, we talk a little bit about Family Matters. And we provide a lot of programmatic solutions, if you will, to helping our people succeed. One of them is backup care. We all know that at times our regular child care falls apart and we need some sort of backup care, and we do provide that service. We also provide a broad array of child care, pet care, house cleaning, et cetera, through our good friends at care.com. And another program that we offer is lactation support for both our women and the spouses and significant others of our men. So when we look at some of those programmatic solutions, they are terrific. But one of the things that we are most focused on is the culture of our firm, and how do we help enhance that culture. And again, I'll keep using these words around succeeding personally and professionally. So we really help our people through several pieces, one of which is career and family transition coaching, which I'll get to in a minute. We also have a very robust employee resource group. Some of you call them affinity groups. But the one that's the most prominent for our families is called Today's Families, because to Ann's point and to Mark's point, our families are changing. They look very different than what they might have looked like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago. And so Today's Families is focused on all kinds of families, whether you're a caregiver to young children, school-age children, adult children, grandchildren, young adults, whether you're caring for adults, whether you're caring for people that have, or are families who have children with varying abilities, all of those things get pulled into what we're calling the Today's Families Network. So if we look at what do we offer from a career and family transition coaching program, and Sarah, if you could flip the next slide, thank you. One of the program specifics is really focused, and both Ann and Mark touched on this, is the varying stages of transition. So if we really think about a person adopting or having a new child, whether it's their first child, their second child, or their fourth child, really what are the transitions? What are the stages when you first find out and you're really excited? And then kind of down the road, how do I tell my team? How do I tell my supervisor? In our case, how do we talk to our clients about that transition? And then lastly, going on, whether it's a maternity leave, paternity leave, parental leave, all of those things, and then how do you transition back to work? So looking at how we help people, what we've devised is, for the most part, a one-on-one coaching. And there are many vendors out there that offer this. We at EY opted to go with an internal coaching program. We already had what we call our America's Executive Coaches that were already providing coaching to varying people throughout the organization, some of our most senior leaders, around the topic of transition. So since we already had those folks in place, why not use the people that know our firm the best and are already working in our firm? So we went with an internal coaching model, but this kind of a model could really be replicated internally or externally. And for us, the participants were high-performing men and women and their counselors. And the counselors were key because we really wanted to ensure that the men and women were getting good feedback from the coaches, and they were getting good feedback, good coaching from their counselors, the people who really are responsible for their day-to-day activity, their experience at the firm. Of course, the drivers of success were around sponsorship, and we have sponsorship for this program at the highest levels in the firm. And we also wanted it to be an opt-in approach. We wanted to make sure that our people really wanted to be in the program, because we couldn't serve every single person that's having a baby or changing their family through birth or adoption. And then the most critical piece was it's customized. Mark said it best, one size does not fit all. In our case, one size sometimes only fits one, and we want to make sure that the coaches were engaged in customizing the program so that it was really relevant and purposeful for the individuals that they were coaching. Next slide. And Sarah, if you could skip over that one. So let me, and that one, I'm sorry, something happened. I don't know what's going on. So let me look at finding the new normal. And let me talk a little bit about why we really thought about this program. And we've got, our pilot started with about 85 people in the program, and we've now exceeded 400 people. And again, it's men and women both expanding their family through birth or adoption. So when we started talking with our men and women about this program and about what they were experiencing both at the firm and outside the firm with their friends and family, we really wanted to talk with them about their mindset. the I can mindset versus the I can't. I can come back to work. I can continue to be a star. I can do what I want to do at work and still have a tremendous life outside of work. So really talking about that mindset. Talking about their commitment to the firm and their commitment to the relationships they have outside of the firm. And again, that definition of family is really, really broad. Both Ann and Mark both brought up the fact that there's so many ways that people create families. We just launched a series around single families and what that's like, because often we make an assumption that there's somebody else that can do the caregiving when we all get really busy. And in a single family, that may be the case, but it may not be the case. So in a single parent household, we often sometimes look at, to Ann's point, men and them wanting significant caregiving and the kind of work-life conflict that they really talk about. And it was interesting in the Boston College study that EY had sponsored, one of the things that I thought was most interesting was men thought that 4 weeks of parental leave was what they wanted, but they knew or they assumed that 2 weeks was what was, call it socially acceptable or politically correct. So there's a disconnect in what men want and what they feel is socially acceptable for them. So that research is tremendous research, and we relied heavily on some of the findings to start thinking through how we approach our men and what they would like to do with regard to their parental leave. So what does commitment look like, and how do you define it, and does it look different once you've changed your family structure to include a new child? How do you prioritize? How do you focus on both your career and your life outside of work? And how do you articulate those needs, both to your team and, again, in our case, to our clients? One of the most interesting conversations we've had with our men and women is negotiation both at home and at work. And that sometimes is a little uncomfortable, particularly for our counselors and our peers to talk about. But that's the negotiation of how you want to live your life outside of work is as important as the conversation around how you want your career to accelerate, develop, and succeed inside of EY. So that negotiation at work and at home is really, really important. And then the collaboration. How do we collaborate? How do I help my team succeed? Because I know they are going to try to help me succeed as I make this huge transition. So there's a lot on that slide, but it's really about finding the new normal. How do you talk about all of this in an environment that is supportive and engaging? So the next slide is really about what we were hearing, and you'll see there's just lots of things on here. Do I need more flexibility? Do I go on a reduced schedule, flexible work arrangement? How do I have these conversations with my team, with my clients? Who else can I talk with? What other peers do I have that have done this before? What do other moms and dads that have either done this very recently or done it a long time ago? What challenges did they face? So those are the kinds of things, those are the kinds of questions our coaches ask. It's the kinds of things that our coaches are interested in learning and then talking through. And it really is a coaching process. It's meeting people where they are, talking about what's most important to them. It's not about telling, and it certainly isn't about providing the solution, if you will. It's really about thinking through what are the options and how can we help our people develop something that's really right for them. And it goes back to that whole customization. So let me end with a couple of slides. Where does all of this get us? This slide, last fall, in September of 2013, we were invited to the Today Show if we could produce a mother who was willing to be filmed on her way back to from maternity leave to the firm. And we have this one woman who is now a partner with us, got promoted, to talk about her transition back to EY. And that was really amazing. It was a great experience for her. It was a great experience for us. And she talked through, and her baby was on camera, and her spouse was on camera, and she talked through the support that she's gotten from her firm, from her client, from her teams, and from her leaders, just about what it's like to transition back as a high performer coming back to work. And then last but not least, your culture, the culture that we create as an organization, is really a competitive advantage. And so we've had the privilege of creating this culture over a lot of years. And what comes back to you is opportunities to be in the media, in shows like the Today Show, Good Morning America, in the New York Times, in the Wall Street Journal, to have all of these great accolades, being on the Fortune 100 best list and working mother now 18 years in a row, 9 years in the top 10, is all because we do a lot for our people to help them succeed. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back to Sarah for questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Mariella, for giving us a closer look into EY's culture, programs, and best practices. That was really great to learn about. And I want to extend a great big thank you to all of our panelists. We do have time for a few questions today, which I will address now. The first question is for you, Mark. In your work with HR leaders throughout the years, what do you think the single most important retention tool is for employers, or is it a mix of different tools, just in your experience?
I think it's a mix of different tools, but I honestly, those organizations and HR leaders and benefit leaders that have focused on that choice and flexibility, a lot of what all three of us have talked about today was making it a one-size-fits-one solution. So the first thing is listening. And then when you act, be proactive, but be proactive in a one-size-fits-one way. I think that's what's making organizations most successful in retaining and acquiring that top talent. It's competitive out there, and by offering those types of programs that provide that, they have a competitive advantage, quite frankly.
Great.
Hi, Sarah,
Okay.
it's Ann.
Hi.
And I would just like to reinforce what Mark says, because we have done a lot of research, and we help our corporate members and others, create an effective workplace that does retain talent over the long run. And I think Mark is absolutely right that you need to, the single, I would say, difference, the thing that makes the most difference is to really think of your people in terms of their whole lives. If they can bring their whole selves to work, and if they feel like you respect and understand that they have whole lives, that is the key to retention. Now, there's no single way to do that, but you have to have that mindset.
Right, right. Thank you so much. Anne, the next question we've received is for you. You had mentioned that men were reporting more work-life conflict than women. Do you believe that that's because women are more used to it and have historically have had the expectation of more work-life conflict? We'd love your take on that.
Well, that's a great question, and we've done work to try to understand what's underneath it, and I do think it's a combination of factors. So on the one hand, as the person posing the question suggests, women do have more experience managing different parts of their lives playing these different roles. Part of it is also that we as a society and as a sort of general culture have, I think, really changed the way we think of women's roles so that nobody, when I first came out of law school in 1985, and one reason why I wrote my first book on everything a working mother needs to know, which was a guide for women who had careers and were starting families on all the issues they faced at work, was that in those days, the question of whether a woman should work outside the home was still very much being debated. So we don't debate that anymore, really. We've accepted that women can have these multiple roles. For men, it's actually, I think, harder because they have less permission, especially at work, to talk about their responsibilities at home. And that's what we have learned through our research, and I think what Mariella is doing at EY to bring men into the conversation is essential, both to address the issues, the very real issues that men are facing that they may not talk about as openly as perhaps women do because the men don't feel the permission to do so, but also to change the culture for everyone.
Great. All right, thank you so much, Anne. Our next question is for Mariella. In terms of the coaching program that you have at EY, who are the internal coaches for the Career and Family Transitions Coaching Program? Are they a set of external coaches that EY contracts with?
Actually, they are internal coaches. So we have a cadre of men and women who have gone through coaching certification. So to be an America's Executive Coach and provide coaching not only to this program, but for other transition programs, like when someone gets promoted in our organization to partner or principal, or if someone gets a very large account and they're going through, let's say, a global transition or a transition to working more globally, they'll be provided a coach. So those America's coaches are internal. We did, for a while, use external coaches, and we do still use some external coaches for some people, but for the most part, this cadre of coaches is all internal.
Oh, great. Very interesting. All right, we do have a few more questions that we'd like to tackle. The next one is for you, Mark. So how does the rise in work-life conflict that was cited earlier in the presentation negatively impact organizations? And what can organizations do to combat this rising work-life stress that everyone seems to be feeling?
Well, if I go back to my organizational consulting days, it would be, try to shift from managing people to managing outcomes. So much of the time when we look at, the impact that the work-life imbalance, if you will, has on an organization, it prevents that organization from growing. And here's something that we've seen that's new. In this last recession, we saw when companies went down, they were in the, call it in the trough, if you will, and they have to climb back up. In all previous recessions and economic downturns, organizations just needed capital. It was more or less access to capital to get back up that hill and get back on top. Today, organizations are sitting on, cash. They are actually have access to money. They have access to funds. And the biggest thing so it's not that access to capital, it's actually access to an alignment of talent. And they have to compete for the best talent, especially with the limited number of HB1 visas, et cetera. So when you talk about work-life balance, those organizations that are more proactive and have really addressed it and assessed what the needs are of their organization, you see right now, you can see the data, those that have the high engagement scores, those that have the highest retention scores, those organizations have an accelerated growth path, accelerated revenue and stock price, et cetera. There's a direct correlation there. So that's it. From the organizational side, it pays huge benefits to do the right things and to impact that work-life balance. From the other side, from the parent side, and this has been an issue for me and a challenge for me in my different work scenarios, is folks need to be transparent and need to open up about what is the challenge and why are the challenges occurring. A lot of times the organizations will try and assess, will try and get to the baseline and try and create programs and processes, but I would encourage employees to have open, candid, and transparent conversations, and hopefully these employees work in a culture that supports that. So I hope that answers the questions. But organizations are desperate right now to attract, retain, and engage. I mean, just look at the oil and gas industry down in Houston. The supply of talent in that area totally outweighs and outnumbers the talent pool. So the focus is on retention, and with that focus on retention, they're looking at every type of benefit. How do they subsidize for benefits? How do they make their benefits very inclusive to meet the whole family's needs? I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Sarah,
this
it's
is
Mariella.
Ann,
Oh, go ahead, Ann.
Okay, just a couple of other things, because you know, we have tied those whole issues around work-life conflict with outcomes, and clearly reducing work-life conflict isn't the only thing that goes into these outcomes, but it's a major component of it. And what we have found is that those companies where there's less work-life conflict or higher work-life fit, which is what we measure, both have higher engagement scores, as Mark was saying, much higher retention rates, but also have better health outcomes. I mean, stress is a major contributor to health care costs in this country, and like double the number of employees that report that they are in excellent overall health. And their employees are getting more sleep, which again is both a health issue and a safety issue, especially in the manufacturing context, and you know, really in every context. I mean, if you're exhausted, you will make mistakes. You're much more likely to make mistakes. So there are definite outcomes that relate to overall organizational performance by addressing work-life conflict. So I don't know, Mariella, what you were going to say.
Well, thanks, Ann. And Sarah, I would suggest EY has measured engagement like lots of other companies have done. And what we have found is our parents are among the most engaged professionals in our organization. So there is data there that would say when you focus on these sorts of things, engagement is enhanced.
Great, thank you so much, everyone. It looks like, just doing a quick time check, we have time for one last question. Mariella, this one is for you. In terms of EY Assist and the associated programs underneath EY Assist, what are your best practices for internal marketing and communication surrounding these benefits? Communication and marketing of benefits are challenges at my organization, this question asker says. So.
You know, it's interesting because I think they're a challenge in every organization. Communication, when and how and where people need it is critical. And let's face it, we communicate to a broad audience sometimes at times when they don't need it. So we communicate about paid parental leave or about today's Families Network or anything about care.com, and it's only until people need it that's when they focus on it. So it's constant communication and then really finding niches that make sense. So through our again, what many of you might call employee resource groups, we really try to focus on the information that's most relevant to that particular group. And so communication around EY Assist, around our great vendors, around the timing of leaves and that sort of thing. We just try to find multiple ways of getting at it. But I don't know of any silver bullet, and maybe you or Mark do, but for us it's just constant communication. Anyone else have an opinion?
Yeah, it's most of the organizations that I consult with, it's around communication. It is around those affinity groups, but it's consistent keeping the word out. It's almost like your radio advertisements. You have to hear it 3 and maybe 4 times before it resonates with you. Or to Mariella's point, it's until you need it. So most of the folks that I work with opt for more communication versus less. So I would agree 100%.
And I would just say, 2 things. One, telling stories and getting those stories out there through your intranet and other means is a way that people remember the information. So if you can tie the benefits to a story, like the story about going out on parental leave and everything that your organization did to support that people will remember that. And our brains are just hardwired that way. And the other thing is, there are some innovative practices that I've heard of recently, and actually Goldman Sachs now has an on-site sort of coordinator that's somebody whose full-time job is basically to help people access benefits and programs that are available to Goldman Sachs employees during the transition to parenthood, and that person is actually a staff member of their external vendor, but she sits in the Goldman Sachs office. She's available for one-on-one coaching and counseling, and she has a weekly call that anybody can join. So, so that's a way of making sure that people are taking advantage and know about what you're doing, especially if you're a larger organization.
Great. Thank you so much, Anne, Mark, and Mariella. It looks like we are out of time for today. Thank you so much for being panelists and partnering with Care.com today, and thank you everyone who joined the call. As I mentioned earlier, you will be receiving a copy of the PowerPoint deck as well as the recording of the presentation within 2 business days, so we will be getting in touch with you very shortly. And with that, we will be taking off now, and have a great rest of the week, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.